Humans are everywhere in the Star Wars universe, but why? Have you ever wondered why Homo sapiens dominate the galaxy? After all, humans are not physically the strongest, most intelligent, or even the wealthiest beings, yet somehow they have achieved unbelievable success compared to thousands of other alien species. In this video, I identified 6 reasons why humans dominate the Star Wars galaxy, from unique biological advantages to our irrepressible thirst for power. First, it's crucial to understand the origins of humans in the Star Wars universe. In the current Disney canon, there's no confirmed origin tale for humans, so we're depending on legend stories. These sources agree that humanity emerged on the core worlds. The new Essential Guide to Alien Species takes this even further by speculating that the species' original homeworld was Coruscant. However, it's important to remember that this book was published in 2013 and was subsequently decanonized the following year. Nonetheless, it remains a popular and logical perspective, and one that most fans go along with. Meanwhile, the canon Star Wars Galactic Atlas does confirm that humanity is an ancient species that predates many powerful civilizations and has emerged as the galaxy's dominant force. However, there's another potential origin story for humans. In Knights of the Old Republic, Revan learns that Sand People's belief that humans evolved from their race after the Rakatan enslaved them and took them from Tatooine. This, in turn, left the Sand People as a genetically distinct people. It's a fascinating theory, but for now, that's all that it is. The Rakatan Empire remains canon, but it has yet to be developed within the current lore. Focusing on legends, humanity's earliest defining moment came after the collapse of the Rakatan Infinite Empire around 25,000 BBY. This liberated the enslaved humans race, who rapidly exploited Rakatan hyperspace technology. The new Essential Chronology labels this as the beginning of the Expansionist era. Humans had already discovered space travel, spreading from Coruscant to other core worlds including Corellia, Chandrila, and Alderaan. Humans on Corellia were the first to develop hyperdrive spaceships. They shared this with other human societies across the core and ignited a new era of exploration and space travel. The new Essential Guide to Species notes that from this point, humans traveled the space lanes, traded with other species, and set up colonies. From here, their populations exploded with increasing numbers across the galaxy, all the way to the Outer Rim. Throughout galactic history, humans have played key roles in every major political institution, from the earliest days of the Old Republic to the dying embers of the First Order. They've produced some of the galaxy's most decisive figures for both good and ill. In the canon novel Light of the Jedi, Lina Soh was the Chancellor of the High Republic when it began a massive expansion into the Outer Rim. Master Avar Kriss was a crucial figure in establishing Jedi-Republic relations in the same era. Lor San Tekka was a significant hyperspace pathfinder in Before the Awakening. Meanwhile, Marchion Ro was the first major named human threat in canon history when he decided to weaponize hyperspace technology. In the millennia before and after, we've seen endless examples of era-defining humans from Darth Revan to Luke Skywalker. No other species has had such a profound impact on the Star Wars universe, with the possible exception of the notorious Yuuzhan Vong in Legends. However, the biggest difference is that the human race has built and created more than it has destroyed. Maybe you'll disagree, but I think that's a fair assessment. We can't talk about human domination of the galaxy without mentioning physiology. This is a fascinating subject because, on the surface, humans aren't particularly impressive. They're not as physically strong as Wookiees or Gamorreans. Kaminoans, Mon Calamari, and Chiss are arguably more intelligent. Humans don't live particularly long, at least not compared to canon species like Hutts, Powans, or Sarians. However, humans do have a single unique advantage: their adaptability. In fact, the new Essential Guide to Species even writes, most sociologists feel that their intelligence and adaptability to new situations have allowed humans to become the most successful and politically powerful species in the galaxy. Let's focus on the physical for the moment. Humans are very dexterous, with 5-fingered hands that enable them to perform a variety of tasks. They stand upright and are very mobile. Meanwhile, humans have diverse physical appearances with varying skin and hair colors. Unlike many beings, humans also wear clothing. This allows them to cope in a variety of environments despite their genetic shortcomings. Human adaptability allowed them to settle in the most inhospitable locations, from the winter world of Hoth to the harsh deserts of Tatooine. Other technologically advanced and intelligent beings struggle when they're exposed to climates outside of their home worlds. The aquatic Mon Calamari struggle away from their watery planet, while Zero made it clear in the Clone Wars that Hutts hate direct sunshine. Humans can wear clothing appropriate to their environment and have few vulnerabilities compared to other humanoids. For example, Saurians suffer from back pains because of their over-large craniums, and Twi'leks have hypersensitive laku. Human lifespans are relatively short compared to other species. This may seem like a disadvantage, but it's actually one of the most surprising drivers behind their success. Humans live for an average of 80 years in canon, with notable exceptions. The High Republic Jedi Porter Engle lived for well over 300 years, and is the most famous example. Darth Sidious also used unnatural dark methods to prolong his life. However, clearly, humans don't live for very long compared to the Hutts or Yoda species. This means they undergo much quicker cultural revolutions. It's entirely normal for human society to undergo a complete overhaul in a couple of generations. Compare that to the Hutts, who have followed the same Khajiitic clan system for literal millennia. Humans aren't around for very long, so they try to maximize their impact within this short period. Reproduction is another key part of human success. Firstly, humans can produce offspring relatively quickly compared to other species. It's also common for them to have multiple children. The Hutts may not be the most obvious comparison, but they're a fascinating one. Hutts are also very intelligent and rapidly adapted to hyperspace technology. However, while Hutts are one of the galaxy's most powerful entities, there are far fewer of them. These slug-like beings rarely produce younglings, so it's a momentous occasion when they do. We even saw Count Dooku and Zero the Hutt weaponize this against Jabba when they arranged for the kidnapping of his son Rata in the Clone Wars movie. An enraged Jabba was ready to declare war and upend his species' entire way of life if he didn't secure Rata's release. The humanoid Saurians are another fascinating example. In many ways, they have advantages over humans because of their binary brains. Canon and legend sources reveal their incredible diplomacy skills and ability to maintain multiple lines of thought simultaneously. However, they have one massive flaw as a species: their ridiculously low birth rate. According to Star Wars Adventure 3, The Hostage Princess, Saurian Jedi had an exemption from the Order's vow of non-attachment, including the Clone Wars era Ki-Adi-Mundi. Humans can easily have multiple children and settle almost anywhere in the Star Wars universe once they've got the technology to support them. They're also biologically capable of reproducing with other species. So far, the only canon examples of successful interspecies procreation are between humans and Twi'leks. Jacen Syndulla is the son of the human Jedi Kanan Jarrus and the Twi'lek pilot Hera Syndulla in the Star Wars Rebels and Ahsoka TV shows. Another example appears in the Clone Wars series, as the veteran trooper Cutlaw Quain has two sons with his Twi'lek wife, Sue. If we delve deeper into the legend sources, there are many examples of interspecies relationships, with some of them leading to procreation. The courtship of Princess Leia mentions that Dathomirians are essentially hybrids of humans and Zabraks. This was later confirmed in the Essential Guide to Alien Species in 2001. Other species evolve from humans in legends, including the Miraluka, the Kifar, and the Zeltron. Gavin Darklighter also falls in love with the Bothan pilot Asir Salar in Michael A. Stackpole's X-Wing series, but it remains debatable if they could have had a child. The crucial point is that the human genes dominate when there's an interspecies procreation. This gives human colonies increased survivability odds in hostile environments, and is a key reason why they're so powerful across the galaxy. Human nature is perhaps the most intrinsic reason why the species has been so successful in the Star Wars galaxy, dominating it for both good and bad. Let's focus on the former aspect first. Humans are natural explorers, and this drove them to the stars. The opening scenes in Episode 4 establish this very quickly. A young and naive Luke Skywalker argues with his Uncle Owen about joining the Imperial Academy. Then he steps outside and watches Tatooine's iconic binary sunset with John Williams' iconic score playing behind him. Luke has an expression of forlorn, desperate hunger on his face, and it's one of the reasons why so many people fell in love with this amazing galaxy in 1977. There's no denying that this can also be a negative. Many humans have a burning desire to dominate, subjugate, and exploit weaker beings. They have a sense of manifest destiny, which other species simply don't possess. Highly intelligent and capable in-canon species like the Chiss and the Kaminoans operated in near total secrecy and limited contact with the wider galaxy. This isolationism is almost entirely against human nature, with rare exceptions including the Mandalorians. Let's delve deeper into the lore. We've already examined how humans exploited hyperdrive technology to their advantage after the fall of the Rakata. However, they weren't the only species to achieve this. The Hutts and Duros also expanded rapidly because of their technological superiority. However, these beings had very different cultural mindsets from humanity, and this is what prevented them from dominating the galaxy. The Duros are a fascinating example because they have many physical similarities to humans. They're intelligent bipeds with opposable fingers and even similar lifespans. According to Battlefront 2, the Duros were one of the first species to gain hyperspace-capable ships. They are natural explorers, so they set out across the galaxy. However, unlike humans, Duros are inherently peaceful and don't set out to dominate. Of course, there are exceptions like the legend Sith Lord Darth Calgus and the Clone Wars bounty hunter Cad Bane. But as a species, Duros don't have the same inherent lust for power and domination. In the Star Wars Build the Millennium Falcon magazine series, we learn that the Neimoidians diverged from them around 15,000 BBY. Unlike humans, Duros have a clearly identifiable homeworld, Duro. However, this has also been one of their biggest vulnerabilities. The Confederacy of Independent Planets captured and subjugated Duro during the Clone Wars and stunned the galaxy. Later, the Empire also dominated this crucial core world, forcing many Duros off-planet. In Legends, Duro also fell victim to heavy population and over-industrialization. This limited their population growth and influence in the wealthiest and most developed region of the galaxy. The Essential Atlas, Alien Encounters, and the Essential Guide to Alien Species all back this up. For the Duros, it's a case of what might have been. The Hutts are another interesting comparison because, like humans, they do have a thirst for domination. However, the key difference is that the Hutts have no desire to reshape society. They're entirely motivated by material wealth rather than by gaining vast expanses of territory. Hutts also don't care about bureaucracy. Their long lives make them incredibly patient, and they're slow to change. Humans want to make an immediate impact. It's extremely difficult to say which is more successful as a species. This isn't a cop-out because they're set up as opposite definitions of success. Humans are far more numerous across the entire galaxy, while Hutt influence is mostly limited to the Outer Rim. But the Hutt way of life has remained consistent for millennia, while human empires and power systems rise and fall. However, there's no doubt that humans define the political systems of the Star Wars galaxy, and their nature drives them to dominate ideologically. They want history to remember them as right. The Hutts don't need moral narratives, just make sure you pay them on time. Humans dominate almost all of the key institutions in Star Wars, with some important exceptions that we'll come back to later. From the Old Republic to the Galactic Empire, the Jedi Order and the Sith, humans have played a central role in them all. One of the main reasons for this is that galactic civilization emerged from the human-dominated core worlds. Humans have a natural talent for bureaucracy, law, and leadership, so it was natural for them to take a central role. Earlier, I mentioned how humans colonized the galaxy after the fall of the Rakatan Empire. This was incredibly significant in helping them consolidate power because of the sheer number of worlds under human control. However, it wasn't until the rise of the Empire that a human-centralized government developed and dominated the galaxy. For all their flaws, and they have many, humans will willingly work with almost every species in the Star Wars universe. The Essential Atlas reveals how there was a fear of chaos as the galaxy opened up. The Republic emerged as a solution to this with a common currency, trade agreements, security alliances, and standardized laws. Human core world planets were the most prosperous, so it was natural for humanity to dominate in the early stages. The overwhelming majority of named Republic chancellors were human, from Lina So to Palpatine. Many species simply avoided leadership or were passive by nature, allowing humans to dominate galactic institutions by default. Unfortunately, it was also incredibly easy for humanity to abuse this dominance if they wished to. The Empire is the clearest symptom of this. Many Star Wars fans may question how it arose so quickly, but this overlooks the reality that the Republic was in turmoil for decades. Even before the Clone Wars, smaller conflicts and disputes were bubbling throughout its member systems. Palpatine successfully and legally transformed the Republic into a militarized state, normalizing autocratic control. However, there aren't many species outside of humanity that would have been capable of executing his master plan. Firstly, because human nature enabled this coercive control. Humans also had the sheer numbers to maintain Palpatine's vision. And finally, the Republic's other constituent members were used to humans being in positions of authority. There was something almost reassuring about a charismatic leader promising strength and stability. As Padme Amidala says in Revenge of the Sith, "This is how democracy dies," with thunderous applause. Humans have also played central roles in both the Jedi and Sith orders. They haven't always dominated the former in numbers, but it's fair to say that the structures of the Jedi emerged from human conventions. The overwhelming majority of Sith Lords since the beginning of the Rule of Two, in both canon and legend sources, were human, with notable exceptions. The short-lived, impetuous humans are more emotionally intense than many other species, and often susceptible to the dark side. It's not shocking that many humans, from Count Dooku to Ben Solo in canon, and Exar Kun to Kip Duron in legends, struggled with the shackling demands of the Jedi Order. Humans are the driving force behind these key institutions, but they're also the biggest destroyers of them. Speciesism is one of the most unfortunate reasons why humans dominate the Star Wars galaxy. There are several reasons why this occurs. You're probably automatically thinking about the Empire, but it goes way beyond this. Let's start with the planets that dominate the galaxy, the core worlds. These are the wealthiest planets in the Star Wars universe and the most influential throughout Republic history. We've seen societies on Chandrila, Alderaan, and Coruscant on the big and small screen. These so-called civilized worlds are dominated by humans. There weren't many aliens dancing at Mon Mothma's daughter's wedding in Andor. In contrast, the Outer Rim planets are underprotected military, heavily taxed, and lacking political representation. In many cases, the Republic abandoned Outer Rim worlds to Hutt control because they didn't want to deal with the chaos. The Attack of the Clones visual dictionary effectively confirms this. Even massive alien-dominated corporations must conform to human expectations and norms. The Neimoidian-led Trade Federation still uses human, legal, and financial intermediaries. Their fellow separatist powers, the Techno-Union and the Banking Clan, also heavily depend on human-populated core worlds. It's no wonder that Darth Sidious and Count Dooku were able to easily manipulate their resentments throughout the prequel trilogy. Speciesism occurs in more subtle ways, and even the good guys are susceptible to it. Naboo's low-tier society in The Phantom Menace is a striking example of this. Humans underestimate and deride the native Gungan population, and the two societies live entirely apart. Boss Nass tells Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan, "The Naboo think they are so smarty. They thinking they is better than the Gungans." Ironically, the humans ultimately depend on the Gungan army to help liberate the planet from the Trade Federation's droid invasion. Other examples of human-centric speciesism include the overwhelming use of Basic as the galaxy's dominant language. Of course, it makes sense to have a lingua franca, but it says a lot that a human language assumes this role. Humans rarely have to adapt to other languages, even in a galaxy of protocol droids fluent in over 6 million forms of communication. Interestingly, the Hutt-controlled areas of the Outer Rim are the only mapped region where Basic isn't the main language. Instead, inhabitants commonly use Huttese. We see this in the Acolyte, where even human scavengers speak Huttese to each other rather than Basic. Throughout galactic history, humans have treated alien planets as disposable or secondary in importance. This is evident during the Clone Wars, where the focus is on defending core worlds from invasion. Yes, this is partly strategic, but it's also a symptom of human-centric policies that help them dominate the galaxy. The Mon Calamari, the Wookiees, and the Twi'leks are some of the most iconic species that saw their homeworlds invaded and exploited during the Clone Wars and the Empire's tyrannical rule. The Empire is the most obvious example of a tyrannically human-centric political entity. However, Palpatine himself was not radically anti-alien. This is also confirmed in James Luceno's canon novel Tarkin. Throughout the Star Wars movies, we see Palpatine allying with non-human species, including Nute Gunray and Mas Amedda. His Sith master Darth Plagueis was a Moon, and while Palpatine ultimately betrays him, it is out of a desire for pure power. He was also pragmatic enough to recognize talent in aliens when it benefited him. Grand Admiral Thrawn is the greatest example of this in Legends and canon. Yes, Thrawn had to prove himself beyond any human, but ultimately, Palpatine was pragmatic enough to reward his tactical genius. The Emperor weaponized anti-alien belief because it was the most straightforward way for him to establish his personal power. Imperial governance depended on uniform law and military doctrine. But putting the galaxy's most populous species at the forefront, the Emperor was able to create a sense of human destiny. It also helped him to destroy the Jedi Order by framing it as other and as a threat to civilization. We see in Andor how many humans easily went along with Imperial bureaucracy while overlooking the injustices it caused to alien species. The Imperial Academy was the dream for many youngsters across the galaxy. Han Solo signed up before he was kicked out, while Luke Skywalker saw it as his gateway to the stars. These were opportunities that humans could realistically achieve, while aliens suffered miserably. Finally, let's wrap up this discussion by looking at some out-of-universe reasons why humans are the center of the Star Wars stories. The most obvious is that it made the movies more relatable to new fans in the late 70s and early 80s. Remember, there had been nothing like this on the big screen before. George Lucas knew that audiences needed to connect with his characters. Cinematically, it's fair to say that the most emotional moments may not have resonated the same way if he switched aliens for humans. Think of Han Solo's iconic response to Princess Leia on Bespin before he's taken away and frozen in carbonite. Would that, I know, be as legendary if they were Rhodians or Celestins? I don't think so. There's also zero chance that a studio would have backed Lucas at all. Now, Star Wars is a massive cultural juggernaut, but nobody believed in his project in the 1970s. Several expensive sci-fi and fantasy movies underperformed in the 60s, including Fantastic Voyage in 1966 and Dr. Dolittle the following year. Even Stanley Kubrick's 2001: A Space Odyssey initially struggled to connect with audiences. Universal, United Artists, and Disney all rejected Lucas before 20th Century Fox finally agreed to a deal with him. However, even then, Lucas struggled with budget cuts and studio indifference. Ironically, the last part may have helped him, because they didn't micromanage him. Lucas almost went broke and suffered extreme stress and illness during filmmaking. He even gave up a higher director's salary to guarantee that he could complete his dream and retain sequel rights. Basically, there was no chance of any studio giving him money if he wanted aliens to be his main characters. It was never going to happen. After the sensational success of the original Star Wars, Lucas opted to fund The Empire Strikes Back himself. To this day, it's critically regarded as the greatest Star Wars movie, but it almost broke him financially. He took out a massive bank loan using his studio as collateral. Again, he was always going to keep humans at the forefront of the story because anything else would be too risky. He was funding the biggest indie movie ever made and flirted with bankruptcy several times. Even today, studios are very reluctant to take risks with the Star Wars universe despite the dozens of confirmed species. There are very few clear examples throughout canon or Legends lore in visual media. Perhaps the strongest on-screen example is the Togruta Jedi Ahsoka Tano in the show Ahsoka. However, Sabine Wren is effectively a co-lead throughout the series, with entire episodes focusing on her. Another example in Legends is the often forgotten Lethal Alliance video game from 2006 for PSP and Nintendo DS. This is one of the most unusual stories in Star Wars media because it focuses on a female Twi'lek smuggler called Rhianna Saren, as she goes up against the Empire. It's worth checking out, especially if you're interested in the topic of human domination and power. Every major institution that stands in her way is human-led. The aliens she encounters are outsiders, including criminals, smugglers, and laborers. Perhaps the cleanest canon example of an alien leading a Star Wars story is Timothy Zahn's Thrawn Ascendancy trilogy. It's easy to see why he's popular. Thrawn is one of the most complex and multifaceted characters in the Star Wars universe. However, the Chiss, Togruta, and Twi'leks are all humanoid species. I think it's safe to say we're unlikely to get a movie or TV show from the perspective of a Geonosian, a Tals, or a Bomar monk anytime soon. I would definitely watch it, but the reality is that this is only appealing to the most devoted Star Wars fans. The Rakatan Empire, Hutt and Sith empires, the Yuuzhan Vong invasions are canon, and Legends examples of other species dominating the Star Wars galaxy. However, even within these incredible stories, most fans want to know about the human experience. That's why humanity will always be the central focus of the Star Wars universe. That's all for this video though. Please like and subscribe.